officially, everybody. In fact, I was asked to present to those of you that don't know exactly how the European reference networks function, and more specifically, the one of epilepsies, that I have the honor to coordinate since now 2019. Before me, it was Ellen Cross, who is now president of the ILAE, but after the Brexit, they could not continue coordinating, but of course, they continue contributing. So just let me briefly tell you that the life of the ERNs is still a baby, in terms of medical evolution at least. They were launched only in 2017 by the European Commission, the main idea being cross-border health services for patients living in the European Union. They were launched, first of all, for 5 years. Then there was a bridging grant for a year and a half. And now we are at the third project of the running grant that ends September 2027. But theoretically, at least, this is a sustainable project of the European Union, and they will continue funding the European reference networks. Now, what is important to know is that epilepsies were not on the list. They were within the rare neurological disorders, and these people that you see on the picture worked for about 2 years on a voluntary basis and convinced the European Union that whatever is epilepsy, because it is at the same time a symptom and several types of diseases, if it was in the middle of the rare neurological, we would do nothing, and that we needed a different approach to help the rare and complex epilepsies community. So these are the 24 ERNs. As you can see, the area of diseases is quite large, or if not to say very large. Many of them, but I will come back to it, are very neuro-oriented. Of course, the epilepsy one, but also the ones for rare neurological disorders, the rare neuromuscular disorders, ITACA, which is mainly the genetic neurodevelopmental, and of course, the metabolic disorders with epilepsy. Now, it has a quite innovative governance system, I would say, for the European Union standards. In the sense, I don't know if it was a mistake, but it is one of the rare structures in Europe that it is not governed by administrators, but by the doctors, which probably happened by mistake. But the truth is that the governing body are 24 coordinators elected by the medical teams. Of course, there is a board of members coming from the ministries behind. And the main difficulty is what they call the subsidiarity principle. People from the US often forget it. Europe is not one country. It's 27 plus 1 with Norway. So this means 27 research ministries, 27 ministries of health, 27 everything, which may complicate things. Now, I insist on this because there was a lot of confusion at the beginning. The ERNs are networks. They are not legal entities. They are not research projects, and they are not hospitals as such. They are a network of hospitals, a network of medical teams. And for example, the main activity regarding the patients, which is patient case discussions, goes as a discussion between experts when they reach a certain level of difficulty and they need advice from their peers to propose the best solution to the patient. So the network as such does not see patients. You need to be seen by a doctor, and it is good that it's like this because I believe that medicine remains a clinical examination before becoming tele-something. It needs someone to examine the patient. There is often confusion because, at least at the European Commission, when they speak about the ERNs, you have the impression they talk about 24 guys who are the coordinators. Today, and I think this is important for all the patient associations, you have 382 hospitals accredited across the European Union, corresponding to 1,619 medical teams, with more than 20,000 medical doctors linked in a network. Of course, it took time and it takes time to have direct contacts, But as an infrastructure, it's not nothing, because of course each one of us was working with his colleagues and we were at similar scientific societies, but progressively, believe me, we created a spirit of community and of connection, at least between the ERNs that have a common field of disease, which was not there 10 years ago, even if we knew our colleagues. And of course, the nurses, the fellows, the staff, that's why I compare it as a 153 Airbus. By the way, the first time I showed the slide to the commission, I made a mistake. I talked about Boeing, and then they told me, why Boeing and not Airbus? But since then, I corrected it, and I'm not talking about Boeing anymore. It was easier, the calculation was easier, but anyway. And this is what we are dealing about, and again, I insist on this picture, because of course, it is natural when we have ourselves, our children, our dears having a disease, it is more important than anything else. But in reality, the ERNs have to deal with 36 million people living with 6,000 different rare and complex disorders. So, and this is our reality of all of us. It's not who has what, and when this is what 1 million people is. And the other difficulty, and of course, here it's overcome in a way, it's language, because the patients, even within the European Union, do not necessarily speak all the same language. So this is where is EpiCARE today, more than 60 centers across the European Union, plus, I don't show the slide because the Commission doesn't like it, but we have a lot of collaborations, of course, also with the UK, with Switzerland, and other European countries, because, of course, we don't want to deprive neither ourselves nor our patients, of course, of the expertise of the other countries. The difference, of course, is, and I understand it, that the European Commission funds the management only of the European Union countries, and that's normal, because, they have the budget for this and not for the neighbors. Now, these are the challenges for EpiCARE now. 6 million people with epilepsy in Europe, 65% more or less that respond to anti-seizure medications, and then more than 160 forms of rare diseases. And I took this table that I love a lot and that you all know, that shows even within one frame of rare and complex epilepsy, how many variants and issues are raised. And you were here this morning as I was, you heard how complex it remains, multiplied by 160 and you have a picture. And of course, I do not forget the other aspect, which is not directly concerning this audience, the pre-surgical evaluation and the complex cases of surgery. We do have the data today that the later we operate those that there is an indication, the worse is the result and the overall outcome. So EpiCARE has to do with both. All the genetic epilepsies with the complexities and, of course, the focal epilepsies that may need surgery. And this is why I developed this brilliant to my eyes, of course, because I did it, pathway. The ERNs are at the end of the pathway. The patient usually is seen at a local level by his treating physician or at a local general hospital. Then he may be addressed to a local epilepsy center, and depending on the complexity and with the investigations that need to be done, should go to a national accredited ERN or not reference center. Which means that the great majority of the job is done within the country or the neighbor country, but it is not the network itself that it is doing it. That's what I was saying. It is the members of the network in collaboration with the general practitioner, the specialist in the village, and so on. And only when it becomes more complicated than that, of course, today the infrastructure offers the possibility to consult with colleagues and discuss what is the best solution, is there a trial available, is there a treatment available, and so on. And of course, you understand it, the quality of the medical information provided to these people is very important. If the data that the center gives to the expert is wrong, the answer will be wrong. So that is why we are very careful on what we are producing. And then, well, I said I want repeat it again. The other important information for you to know is that the medical teams accredited by the European Commission as members of an ERN do not receive funding from the European Commission. I'm saying this for my American friends because when they listen to this, they say, wow, how are you doing it? Pro bono. There is not one medical team that if it not in their own country, they may receive support. The French government, for example, for the centers of reference provides an additional, not much, budget to have one more practitioner, for example. At the European level, it is not the case because it is not at the European Union to pay for every country the doctors, but this means that when all of you are on a waiting list and complain, the reference letters do nothing, they do a lot, but the problem is that unless at a local level they get support and have a more sustainable and bigger medical team, they cannot absorb the patients. Not that they don't want to, it's that simply there is no place, there are no people to do it, and I think it is important to know it. The other things that were discussed yesterday, all the medical teams, independently of the domain, were selected on the basis that they can offer cross-border expertise, that they are asked to develop new knowledge generation and training, that they are asked to foster research by developing new research projects, that they are asked to voluntarily contribute to inter-ERN collaborations, and to also, of course, work with patient advocates. And this also developed a lot, and I will show you a picture in a second of this. And because it was discussed yesterday, I took this. On our table, they were saying, well, how can the ERNs well, it's already the case. Look, the European Pediatric Neurology Society Congress 2 years ago. EpiCARE participated at the whole pre-symposium, but above all, there was a session where the 5 ERN coordinators were at the same session discussing rare diseases. Metabolism, rare neurological, rare neuromuscular, epilepsy, and ITACA. And these brilliant young people that are those that do the work, the management teams funded by the European Commission, are not only EpiCARE, each one of them is a different ERN. And they built together their presentation at the congresses. They did, I don't know, they did the same in Rome, they did the same in Rome, where all the ERNs were together, and there are already actions, despite the fact that, again, it's too young, 2018, 19, it's nothing. You already have publications where we look on common practices on genetic testing. There are papers already on how the different ERNs manage mitochondrial disorders, and there are others ongoing. So be confident, the work is done. It's slow because there are a lot of things to do, but it is done and the ERNs collaborate between them. Now, a few words about the structure of EpiCARE. There is a difference with other ERNs. The QR code can give you access to a booklet that you have everything, so you can have a siesta and not listen to me. We could not structure the ERN per diseases, because first of all, there are too many, but second, because again, we have an entry symptom. So we were obliged to construct it per working groups of the tools we use or the public health services. And why not? Well, first of all, because our first challenge is to achieve early diagnosis. You all say this and you're right. But early diagnosis means that the reference centers ideally should also see the first seizure of patients, because you diagnose a rare disease only once you diagnose it. Otherwise, before they just have epileptic seizures as everybody else. That can be rare or not rare, complex or not complex. Second, because, of course, the diagnostic investigations to diagnose a rare and epileptic developmental encephalopathy, I know that everybody is keen to have very specific investigations, but believe our experience, 80% of what needs to be done at the beginning is exactly the same, no matter what is the genetic mutation. It changes later on when the diagnosis is made. When the functional analysis is made, yes, we are more and more, and we discussed it this morning, and you will hear it later, in targeted therapies and so on. But the beginning is more or less the same. So the more experienced are the teams, the better they can approach this. And this is why we structured the ERN on working groups that include neurophysiology, neuropathology, pre-surgical evaluation, targeted medical therapies, neonatal epilepsies, and all these people interact together with the other ERNs to develop what they have to develop. Guidelines. Guidelines, all those are already in progress. Practically, the 3 of them are almost finished now. But again, we need to keep in mind that a guideline, I was saying it yesterday, or even a leaflet, it is not the same thing if it is signed by parents on a blog or if it's signed by a doctor who takes the medical responsibility that this is a validated treatment. It is not that we are afraid. We are the first to prescribe off license. But at least we have the patient in front of us and we discuss with the parents and we take a risk that may turn against us tomorrow, but at least it is a conscious risk of something we know. When you start publishing things that nothing is validated, the risk is huge because you do not know how the people will interpret it and what they will do. And I think you need to take this into account or to keep it in mind. And I put the SCN8A example always not to disappoint people, but the genetic approach was known in 1995. We only now start having the first consensus statements of how to treat these patients. We progressively discovered that there were at least 3 phenotypes that now have a tendency to become 5, by the way. So I think that this is what the ERNs can do today. They can produce guidelines, but again, keep in mind that a production of a guideline can be published in a scientific journal, disseminated in a website, but the implementation depends at national level of the government structures and the administrations. I give a very stupid example every time. If the guidelines for premature neonates say that you need 1 EEG every week for a premature neonate, and the medical team is not given neither the machines nor the doctors to do the EEG, the guideline is excellent, but it is not implemented. And this is where I think that there is space for collaboration between the patient associations and the medical teams. Again, preferably not asking each one for his own disease, but trying to put all this together and convince the authorities of the need to do, for example, newborn screening or neonatal EEGs or whatever is the guideline every time. And of course, the other part of the work of the ERN is public health. We are working on national networks. What should be the national networks? Education and training of the next generation, and a lot of activity to foster research. These are just examples. This is the mapping we did. Every slot you see there is a pathway for epilepsy in a European Union country. If you look at it all together, it's chaos. It means we do not have an agreed pathway for the patients between the countries. French are convinced that the French is the better, the British the same, the Italians the same, but it means that we lack data to be able to go and say to the authorities, this is the best pathway. We are talking here about implementation of gene therapy. They will never implement gene therapy in each village or in each small city. No government has the money to do this. They will do it in big centers, in big cities. So if we do not agree what we really need, and each one wants his maternity to be next to his house, at the end, nothing happens. And we keep complaining, but nothing is going on. So I think that the data is there. This is the other work that we did. Look at the differences within the European Union of access to genetic testing. We are not even talking about poorer countries. And definitely, I will not go into the details, it's not the topic, it is not the same, which means that there is a public health policy to develop within Europe. So yes, if this is at the end the pathway, that you start from the local and you go up to the centers, I think that concerted actions of these groups with the medical community are probably indispensable if we want to advance. What else do we do? What we call patient empowerment and activities with patients. It was mentioned yesterday at the workshops. EpiCARE is developing today leaflets with what we know per rare disease, it is obligatory not more than 4 pages. 2 pages are for the GP and 2 pages are for the family. And the idea is, again, we should not expect from all the general practitioners to know all the diseases. I would say even not from the child neurologists to know them all. But the leaflet helps when a diagnosis is made that the parents, who are the best administrator of this information, can go to his doctor or to the emergency department. Dravet syndrome, for example, they developed the association, an excellent emergency protocol. Alternating hemiplegia are doing the same work and trying to find solutions. So these are the things that the fact that these networks provide the infrastructure can help all of us developing this kind of actions. We didn't forget the nurses. We didn't forget them because I am convinced, and I'm not the only one, that particularly the epilepsy monitoring units without nurses would just shut down. Are behind the EEG the whole day, it's the nurses. So we are trying to train them, and again, language is fine, but we succeeded bringing 76 nurses together, and we discovered what we should know in advance. That yes, one Italian nurse should not speak English, but she could speak French, and her French colleague should not speak English, but should speak Italian. So at the end, the workshop went perfectly well. It looked a little bit like a Babel Tower, but doesn't matter. They agreed, and now they work together, they share the data, and they do whatever. Research. I know how keen you are and how important it is. All the researchers in the room yesterday discussed. At the European level, there are a lot of projects. And if we respect the fact that we have an infrastructure as a backbone, there are a huge number of opportunities for collaborations, for having funding, and for working with the respective teams. The difficulty for the moment comes from here, GDPR, but let us not forget one detail. All this at the level of the European Union is done at the name of the patients. That's the strange story. It is to protect the data of the patients that every doctor who wants to treat the patients uses WhatsApp, and we still discuss how we can share the data. So I think that these are issues that if we agree and the patient community feels safe and secured, that the doctors don't play with the data, but they try just to put it together to find better treatments, better pathways, the support of the patient associations will end up solving part of this issue. Part, not all of it. I am not dreaming. There are a lot of regulation issues today that the guys at the Commission cannot overcome. When I talk with them, they tell me, yes, we understand when you talk to us about your patient, but you need also to understand, but for me as an IT platform, the moment you put the data in, it's not a patient anymore, it's data. And if this data is stolen or diverted, I am responsible. So the truth is in the middle, and it needs work. It is not, again, just trying to find a solution. The patient advocates of EpiCARE are very proud of me, and me also, because I also use this. This is their work. When we started 5 years ago, we had 6, 7 patient advocates. I don't know how they did it, but they ended up with about a list of 210 emails of patient advocates across Europe, covering everything. And of course, we still need to work. We still need to find ways that the patient associations can express their needs within such networks. But the work is in the process, and that is really why I think that those federated approaches of associations are extremely important. You see, I know the feeling. I know the feeling that particularly from patients associations, I've seen it several times. If we put a lot of pressure to the local medical team, the research for our child would go faster. This is not true. It will go faster if the medical teams can collaborate with the patients. They can find an idea, first of all. It's not that they don't want to, but sometimes it's complicated. You show it this morning. And then this federated approach can lead to other aspects. So I'm finishing. This is the practically last slide. This is what we did in the last 4 or 5 years. 60 members, as I said, dealing with 160 diseases. Already 85 research projects and clinical trials that we supported one way or another. more than 70% of our centers, despite the difficulty to share the data, now implemented a common registry, not a database, a registry, which has exactly the same data from Belgium to Italy. And the day that we will solve the issues of data sharing, they can be compiled. But it is easy for us to know, to find how many GRIN 2B are in Europe, because I just have to send an email to the 60 centers and ask how many each one of them has. These are the case discussions, more than 230 cases, very complex cases discussed at the different meetings between experts of different countries. 85 webinars, including an immediate answer both to COVID and to the Ukrainian war. I mean, when COVID started, a week later, there were webinars there saying to the doctors, these are the drugs that you can use for anti-seizure medication to avoid increasing the seizures of a patient with COVID. 1 week, because the infrastructure was there. And these are the number of the guidelines. So this is the whole story. These are all these people that are involved, and I really believe it is an asset, at least for Europe, not only European Union. And the more we use it as a backbone, the better are the chances of collaborating with the patient association.